Okay, good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the December meeting of the Canadian Aviation Historical Society, of which I'm the president for my sins. My name is Jeff Pine, and thank you all for coming today. I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Roscoe, who will talk about our speaker today.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. It's my job to slightly more formally introduce Brian. This is the handsome gentleman standing here. Brian rejoined the chapter after his 25-year TV film career. Prior to that, he was 15 years in publishing before joining TVO and was an Air Reserve captain 1975 to 77 and 1980 at CFB Trenton. He is an RCAFA, CWHM and CAHS member, a Historic Canada speaker, and an RCAF associate historian. He's also our chapter secretary and a past speaker, including twice at CAHS National. So Brian is going to present Jack Waters. He was the 1967 Red Knight Centennial pilot who flew, in the year 1967, who flew his red CT-133 Silver Star. And of course, we have a picture right here of just that aircraft. So Brian was intending to include Zoom in this presentation, but for those of you who've been here before, our Zoom attempts were pretty disastrous, so Zoom is out of the question. So Brian, over to you to see how you're going to incorporate Jack Waters into this presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here to speak about this fantastic gentleman who I've had, Jack Waters, who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times now. It seems to me that I'm his long-lost son, because we exchanged so many communications, and over the months, it's going to be a great pleasure for me to get up to see him again. This has been a bit of a challenge presenting this, because normally we have sometimes we have our subject matter persons here amongst us. Jack, as you heard, he lives in Orleans, just outside of Ottawa. He's 87. He actually used to be a faculty member here when he was lieutenant colonel, and his terminal posting in the forces was here on the War Studies program and on the Command and Staff program. He did tell me, and we shared a laugh, saying that it was he takes his hat off to us for getting the technology here to work, because even then, and that was 25 years ago, the projector was kind of finicky. Before I begin, I'd like to get the commercial part of this presentation over with. Jack and John Corrigan have provided these pamphlets and a bookmark and a smaller brochure that you'll find on the tables upstairs. These are free for you to take, and if you're interested and do not personally own any of John Corrigan's books, 3 books about the Red Knight, there's order information there. There'll also be a slide at the very end of my presentation that'll stun you with its beauty, and particularly with the order information. Here's what you're going to see today. As I said, I could not have Jack here, so I did the very next best thing over a period of some months for other purposes, but also thinking of this. I filmed him at CASMA, the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa, in front of a T-bird, a Red Knight T-bird, and you'll see plenty of that in a minute. Jack was the subject, my guest, in a live presentation at Canadian Aviation Historical Society convention in Ottawa. That was on June 21. So you're going to see some footage from that. The footage here is going to vary. There's about 10 clips. They vary from 35 seconds to as many as 8 minutes. I've done my best with the sound quality, but I think it's pretty good. And as a professional filmmaker, I'm pretty happy with the result. I hope you will be. What you're also going to hear about today is a remarkable story of a professional fighter pilot. Now, most fighter pilots are wild, challenge the sun, dash off to do battle with the enemy. Jack was all of that, but he was an exceptional pilot, and you don't have to scratch very deeply when you're in communication with him, because that comes across in spades. He flew well, you'll see all of this, but you'll see that he flew about a third of his career in various postings, training, operational fighting, a fighter pilot in Germany, based in France actually, in NATO in 1961 to 63. And he also did the Red Knight gig, and then he went on to do more instructing. He had a very full career, as you'll see in a minute. But the thing that anchors him is his time as a professional pilot. I should also say that he's a dyed-in-the-wool family man, has a very close collection of friends, and you'll probably meet and see some of his family who came out to be with him when I did the live presentation as my guest at National. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to commence now with a little opening that I'm pretty happy with, and I hope you will be too. Here we go. This is Jack, near the end of his career, being invested with the Order of Military Merit. This took place in Ottawa with Governor General Ray Nittition, who you see on the right. You see the size difference. Now, I want you to appreciate that about Jack. He's not a tall man. And this came in handy when he was in some of the cramped cockpits of 50s aircraft. You'll see too that he accumulated as pilot in command 4,346 hours and did 39 years starting out in the Royal Canadian Navy actually for 18 months and then switched to pilot training. So he did 39 years in the RCAF and then the Canadian Forces. Some of you may not know much about what the Red Knight program is. Some of you will know quite a bit because about 3 or 4 of you were either at Ottawa on June 21st or were probably tuned in to the Zoom presentation from Ottawa. So here I have a 5-minute clip that will present kind of soup to nuts about what the Red Knight program was. And I look forward to pressing on from here, but have a listen, and I think you'll find it quite edifying. Brian Cotter here with a presentation about Lieutenant Colonel Jack Waters, Canada's 1967 Red Knight. And here's the man himself, chatting with his grandson Greg at a recent film session at CAHS in Ottawa.
Okay.
So there's a question that I've been wondering for a little bit, and I don't think I've ever asked you.
No.
But did you have a call sign?
I didn't have a call sign. That's it's an American. Well, my call sign as a Red Knight was Red 1.
Okay.
So that's one of the call sign.
There you go.
But it's nothing fancy like Tom Cruise.
Right.
Yeah. So because that wasn't in the Canadian tradition.
Okay.
But for the Red Knight program, I was Red 1.
Red 1.
And my
I love
alternate pilot was Red 2.
Okay.
Easy to remember.
Fresh from mission briefing, a buoyant 29-year-old Flight Lieutenant Waters and Crew Chief Corporal Bob Hawes stride out to his T-bird. After strapping in and starting up, Jack blasts off for his show over the huge Boy Scout Jamboree assembled at Birds Hill Provincial Park. So just what was the RCAF Red Knight program?
It's noteworthy because it was a single aircraft, and so where we have the snowbirds, we have a 9-ship formation. The Red Knight was a solo display, which meant that it was able to travel all over the country in ways that a larger team couldn't. So more people got to see it over its run.
Like it would go to small communities, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people was a large community that would get to see these. It would have been impressive because the show was 15 minutes. If it was at a small community and it was the only thing basically that afternoon, it would have left a big impression.
To ensure the team's single aircraft remained visible, it was painted bright red, a scheme that reminded some of the famed German flying ace, Baron Manfred von Richthofen, who was brought down during a 1918 dogfight with Wop May and Arthur Roy Brown. What initially started as an unofficial reference was soon formalized, with one of the RCAF's most iconic pieces of nose art gracing the Red Knight's aircraft, a Red Knight's helmet with a flowing golden plume set against a white background.
The important thing is for the Red Knight program that you have a fighter pilot background. That was an essential. All of the Red Knights, bar one, were true fighter pilots. And the only one who wasn't a true fighter pilot didn't have a great career. He crashed. And you develop a sense of what you're doing as a fighter pilot because you've trained to a number of procedures, and so you're not going to do anything that's going to interfere with the safety of your program.
The aerobatic displays they performed were unique to each pilot, but a Red Knight performance tended to last about 15 minutes and generally included advanced aerobatic maneuvers, inverted passes, tight turns, rolling turns, rhubarb rolls, stall turns, cubinates, 4-point rolls, vertical rolls, and various loops. As Red Knight Jack Waters recalled, the demonstrated maneuvers were those familiar to any modern military pilot, especially one engaged in combat operations, where the essential characteristic was, and is, performance at the edge of the flight envelope. What set the Red Knight's performances apart from a training exercise were the seamless transitions between each maneuver, all while flying at high speeds and at very low altitude.
Incidentally, that takeoff you saw in Winnipeg has got to be the smoothest Hollywood takeoff I've ever seen. I don't know about how some of you feel it, but I was teasing Jack about it, and he said, well, I had to hold it down so that the cameraman could get all kinds of good shots, and I think he succeeded. Anyway, this is a little summary of Jack's career. The blue bits in the left-hand panel are the years and postings where he was actually flying. So you'll see that he did his training on various aircraft, including the Chipmunk, the Harvard, a lot of time on Harvards, and then a T-33. And what's consistent about Jack throughout his training and into his advanced professional years, as long after he was a pilot, an active pilot, was that he always rose to the top and sometimes exceeded and came to out at the very top of his classes. So for instance, he won in 1957 the Air Force Pilot Training Award for the most outstanding pilot of, I think, 60 on his course. This was a consistent theme, and extended right through to his white ticket and then his green ticket navigation training. And long before he became a Red Knight pilot, he was actually streamed, and this was the curse of many a pilot, streamed from right after advanced training into the instructional role, rather than being able to go overseas and fly Sabres, in this case, a lot sooner. This wasn't particularly frustrating for Jack because as long as he was flying, this is what he loved. And he became, and again, he excelled in the category as an instructor, of being a fabulous instructor for what was then called British, in the fighter pilot community, or the RCAF community, British Air Commonwealth Training Plan Part 2, which was in the 50s, of course, when Canada instructed, again, took on the role within NATO of instructing a lot of pilots from all the NATO nations. At first, there were only about 4 NATO nations, but at the end, near the end of the 4 years, for instance, Jack was at Gimli, Manitoba, and just before he was posted overseas, he was training Norwegians, French pilots, several Brits, etc. So you get the idea. Just before I leave this slide, I want to go on to explain that right after the Red Knight, he was promoted to squadron leader. So this was 67-70, and he became the CEO of the Flight Instruction School, again at Portage Le Prairie. This was the end of his flying time. He went on to command positions and staff positions, flying the desk, so to speak. One of the command positions was command of the CO of the radar station at Lowther, just near Barrie, a little bit north of Barrie. This was a Mid-Canada Line station, a Pine Tree Line station that he has favorite stories about, including otters flying into the base. He also and to one further thing, he went overseas in '84 to the RAF college in Cranwell, where he was on a war studies course, and he tells an interesting story about how he actually, for his thesis, he actually won the distinction of being the top student. His Brit commandant, the RAF commandant, said, oh, well, you should actually probably share that with an RAF top student. So he actually ended up sharing the award, and Jack sloughs it off nowadays by saying, well, we folks of Irish extraction, we're kind of used to this. One last thing, one other cute story about Jack is he was the base admin officer at CFB Uplands, which incorporated Ottawa North and Ottawa South, so that would be Uplands and Rockcliffe. And he tells a fun story where the King and Queen of Sweden were visiting the base, and the base commander was otherwise occupied, and he was the escorting officer. And there he was, they were signing, the King and Queen were signing a document about how happy they were and giving their blessings to the base before they got on board the 707 aircraft to take them back. And Jack, he cleared his throat, and the king caught the inference, and he leaned in and said, "My dear, I think they want their pen back." So thanks to Jack's diplomatic throat clearing, that happened. Jack's time as a pilot in command breaks down like this. So you see, of his 4,000 plus hours, a lot of them, 3,500 plus, were on the T-Bird, known at the time as just the T-Bird, or T-33, officially the CT-33, the Canadair built version versus the American version, of which Canadair delivered about 600 plus. His time overseas as an operational fighter pilot and in training at Chatham to go overseas took up the next big chunk, where he flew Sabre 5s and 6s. His most outstanding time on the Sabre, he said, was the 3 years at Grostiken at 2 wing, when Canada had 4 wings. You see the other aircraft that he flew, only 200 hours on the Chipmunk, which he actually loved. And knowing that this is a de Havilland chapter, has its heritage as a de Havilland chapter, I know some of you will appreciate that. You see the other aircraft that he was involved with, and he had unqualified time shepherding everything from the 104D right through to the CC-109 Cosmopolitan. This is all unofficial, and including his time on a US Black Hawk, which probably was measured in about 10 or 20 minutes. This is a summary of his training. I'll just briefly run through this, starting out at Centralia, and primary training for 2 months at Claresholm, Alberta, which was a very active base, where he did a lot of time on Harvard. It's a very challenging aircraft. And his advanced training at Portage, where he returned to later, and where he won the honor diploma, as I said. Special instrumentation time, his white ticket, was a mere 6 weeks, and 57 at Saskatoon. And that included time on the Expediter, the C-45 Expediter, or Bug Masher, he called it. And then, of course, his flight training, operational training at Chatham on Sabre 5s. This is his graduation mess dinner. I make special reference to this because it was his Flying Proficiency Award, where he just clearly was destined, and he was nabbed from there, identified as a future instructor. This gentleman, I thought, was Joe McCarthy, of Dam Buster fame, but he is actually not, though they both hold the Distinguished Flying Cross. This is a different Joe McCarthy, who Jack said had the unique distinction of always volunteering to do the Harvard weather check in the morning. So as they were out jogging around the airfield before breakfast, this particular Joe McCarthy always snagged the Harvard and was off and terrorizing the neighborhood with low takeoffs as they were running around the circular track. Speaking of Claresholm, I just have a little pop trivia quiz here.
Okay, pop quiz time. From 1951 to 58, when it closed, which RCAF training command station had a thriving business on the side?
Claresholm was the ranch also. It's the only RCAF base that ever had cattle as its symbol. OM, Claresholm.
Was Friday night a mess on skate night?
Oh, yeah, we had steaks, but they did them a different way in the ranch country. basically, it's the cooking for 24 hours in a pit, and then you can enjoy it.
So life wasn't so bad as a trainee, and Western beef, and particularly Claris Clumb style, was a particular treat. Every Friday in the mess, Jack told me. His principal mount, and a principal mount of the Canadian Forces was of the RCAF, was the CT-33 Silver Star. This was the specs on the aircraft, for those of you who are a little light on this, in terms of your knowledge of it. It's this version, and I'll just say right off the top, had the Rolls-Royce Neen turbojet, which gave it 10% more performance than the American version, which was a huge significant difference. And consequently it had greater range, greater fuel economy, and was a great pleasure to fly as a training aircraft, but also as a lead-in aircraft for armament training as well as fighter pilot training. And as you'll know later, as you'll see later and can guess, for the 7 years of the Red Knight program that actually flew this aircraft, and before switching to the Tudor in the last 2 years. Interestingly enough about the T-33, the fleet in total compiled over 400,000 hours, with the average airframe time of 12,000 hours, which is quite extraordinary for an aircraft. And so the Canadian RCAF and later the Canadian Forces went through a lot of them. I think, what was it, the number here, somewhere here, 600 and some airframes built, with 50 of the last ones being retired in 2005. Its speed was 570 miles an hour, or about 520 knots. And its cruising speed was a cool 410 knots, so it's a pretty hot ship. I'm going to come back to this. This will show up in one of the videos, but during all of Jack's instructional time, for 4 years, particularly at Gimli, the RCAF, long before he was even selected long before he even went overseas, Jack was selected, as were many instructors, to fly these huge formations. This is a particularly iconic formation that was featured over the CNE here in Toronto for 3 years, in 1960 to 63. They drew instructors from all over Canada, mostly the West. And the bottom photo is an image of what it's like to be in this, close-up image of what it's like to be in this structure, in this formation. Jack did tell me that periodically, as they were assembling at 20,000 or 25,000 feet, as they were assembling, someone would have a flame out. And so, for instance, if you're in the sea there of the RCAF, say the lead ship, you'd have a flame out, and you'd drop back, started to lose altitude, and the pilot would go through a relight procedure and then goose it to rejoin into his formation. This would happen 2 or 3 times every practice session. It's amazing, he said, that it didn't ever happen on performance day, so that was pretty good. Can anyone guess on does anyone know which position Jack flew within this formation? It was, see the F there, you see the lower part of the F, that's Jack on this particular shot. So he said he never had a flame out, but it was a risk, and always pilots were so experienced that they were able to get back information without too much trouble. In fact, it was a little bit of a joke in the mess. One last thing about this particular shot is that the pilots were drawn from all over, so it was quite a reunion. And when they formed up to make this particular shot, there was a section that came out of North Bay, a section that came out of Ottawa, and others that came out of Toronto International. And they rendezvoused over Peterborough and formed up there before flying in. So there's a bit of trivia for you. I asked Jack, what was it like to fly the T-Bird? So let's proceed with this.
Canadair T-33 Silver Star was an easy airplane to fly, and I say that's in comparison to the one that we had trained on, which was very difficult to Harvard. And I'll tell you, you had basically a throttle to push and a control stick to manipulate, and that was it in terms of handling the airplane. And for the handling, it meant that with the throttle you were getting the power that you need to do the routine, and with the control stick you had the capability of any turning, any climbing, any descending, and it was a true treat to fly, given the simplicity of this new generation of airplanes, which was, of course, the same type of simplicity that was in the newest generation of fighter airplanes that I flew. The first thing we did when we started to fly the Sabre was to go supersonic. And part of that was just wanting to get the little pin that said you had broken the speed of sound. The issue of going to supersonic in the Sabre meant that you dropped that boom on something on the ground. And people have complained about being boomed by people in the air doing exactly that. So you go to 40,000 feet, as high as you can go. Actually, we could go to 50 if you really worked. And you roll over, point it straight at the ground, and just full power and break the sound barrier. There's no feeling in the airplane when it happens, but there is a wave of air that's preceding you that's going to hit something. I never tried that in the T-Bird because the fact is that the T-Bird was not built structurally to go supersonic. It had straight wings as opposed to the swept wings that the Sabre had. I had trained on a T-Bird. I had instructed on the T-Bird, the T-33, for 4 years in Gimli, and I had done an awful lot of work in all parts of that activity. One was aerobatic, the other one was formation flying. In fact, you may have seen in some of the literature, our most famous formation flight was 38 T-Birds, T-33s, spelling out RCAF. I was really well trained.
A challenge, so I found it a very roomy cockpit and very comfortable. You could move around a bit, and my claim to total comfort was the fact that we, 22 of us, flew in a gaggle across the Atlantic in them to deliver them new airplanes from the Canadair to Europe to supplement the aircraft in the air division. So even on a long transatlantic trip like that, was total comfort. Of course, the trip was broken up from Goose Bay to Greenland, where the Americans met us and said that they didn't get a food delivery that day, so we'll give you a sandwich if you leave. And we did. And we went to Iceland and stayed overnight. And then a great trip from Iceland to Scotland, which was fantastic. And as an aerobatic pilot, I always loved to do a roll. So we were stretched out. So I said, well, I'm going to do a roll. that's the last I saw of my buddies until we saw the endless sky in Scotland. So, thank God. What a feeling.
Jack doesn't tell the entire story there. As they were approaching continental Europe, that's when he realized that he had tried the roll just before that, and he was looking frantically for his formation mates. And this is getting near the end of his trip, so fuel is going to become an issue. And he said, well, he very sheepishly called up Leader and said, Leader, this is Formation 4, his call sign, I forget what it was. And he said, what position is the sun? And the Leader responded, the sun's on my port quarter at such and such an angle. And Jack said, thanks, Leader, and found his way in because he was able to orient. He realized he wasn't in as much trouble as he thought. This business of doing rolls, you're going to hear more about this with Jack. This is I think one of his favorite maneuvers. But more about that in a minute. I'd like you to absorb this front passage and then the bit at the top. This is a T-bird is a wonderful warbird, but it is very basic and demands a lot of hand-eye coordination. It has little automation and no computerization. You operate it manually in almost every aspect. It is truly a pilot's airplane. Now, this was written in 2014 from an American warbird operator, Larry Salgamet. And for a bit more on the flight characteristics, I thought we'd dip into Turbo Tarling, the great Turbo Tarling, the late great Turbo Tarling, who accumulated over 10,000 hours on the T-bird in the RCAF and CF. He flew 2 or 3 other aircraft, including operational fighters, but this is what he had to say. It was the hottest and easy, it was honest and easy to recover if flown correctly. It didn't want to spin and would only accommodate it if you wished it, insisted. The ailerons were extremely sensitive and required concentration to keep the wings level. This is just in formation or level flight. So constant. A loop required 5,000 feet, and thousands of feet were lost in a spin in mere seconds. There was no time or space for inattention while flying the T-33. That point reinforced several times in his article. There are only a few prohibitive maneuvers in the T-bird: inverted spins, hammerhead stalls, falling leaf, and the tumble. The tumble was particularly to be avoided for trainees. Acrobatics in the T-30 were a cinch, and the aircraft simply had no vices if it were flown as instructors. Rolls were the easiest. This is an aircraft designed by the great Kelly Johnson, and the same designer as the 104 and several other aircraft. An offshoot of the P-80 interceptor from the first American fighter in the 1940s. And went on to have a huge long career in the USAF and many other air forces, including Canada, who flew it, probably amassed more hours than anyone else. This article by Turbo Tarling came out of, I should mention, the Canadian Aviation Historical Society Journal from winter 1991. It was a pleasure to read, and it's quite humorous. If you happen to have back issues, I'd dig it up. Jack then went on to his posting in overseas posting. I'm not going to dwell on this particular section of his career. That's for maybe another story because he's got lots of them. He served with 430 Squadron out of Gross-Tekin, part of 2 Wing. It was a particularly tense time in Europe because you'll recall there was something called the Berlin Crisis, where the Soviets in 1961 wanted to take over Berlin, and the world was on edge, particularly NATO forces, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was of course 62, which was also a hot period. So you'll see on the far right there this picture of a gun camera photo from Jack's gun camera, which he pasted into his log of him very close to a 102, an F-102, an American interceptor, newly introduced to USAF Europe. I asked Jock, how far away were you when you shot this guy down? And he said, oh, I was, well, he said, you're supposed to be 800 feet. That's all he would tell me. This looks like it's much less than 100 feet. Now that's from the gun camera in the wing, of course, or the nose, of course, so it's a pretty good indicator. The other two photos are just quickly the bottom left. Your bottom left is his flight on Zulu Alert. Every month for a week, pilots would stand Zulu Alert, ready for a 5-minute takeoff in their aircraft in case the bad guys came across, the Warsaw Pact nations came across the dividing line, and sometimes they did. Jack made a point of saying, and this is a true fighter pilot in him, he made a point of saying that that never happened when a Canadian squadron was on Zulu Alert, because the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact knew the routines and they knew not to tango with the Canadian pilots, Canadian fighter pilots. This was this is the early 60s, before the shift to the strike aircraft, the 104 strike roll. And these were they were flying Sabre 6s with the Arenda 14 engine, which was exceptionally more powerful than any American version of the F-86. And the Canadian pilots, all 9 squadrons, and later 8, were the exceptional fighter pilots on the continent. So Jack quite rightly says, and you'll see his squadron mates in your bottom right, you see his squadron mates gathered around for a commemorative photo, this F-86 6, Sabre 6, sometimes called the Sword, just before they were sent off to Rabat for gunnery practice. It was a particularly proud time in Jack's life, and he speaks, his favorite aircraft is the T-Bird, but his next favorite is the F-86. This particular photo is a painting recently produced by renowned Canadian artist Peter Robichaud, New Brunswick-based. This was commissioned by Jack, and there's quite a special story about this one. Jack was the wingman on the left, and the wing commander, the CEO of the squadron, was John Mullen, Wing Commander John Mullen. They were just egressing from the Dieppe beaches, where they had done a commemorative fly past over those tragic beaches, a tragic site of the Canadian landing that went askew. And this was the 20-year anniversary. As they were departing, they had to go back for fuel across to England. I forget the name of the base, but it was just a short hop across the channel. Jack said, Wing Commander Mullen just happened to hit the RT button and say, "Hey lads, would you like to see how we left the continent in 1942? And George Akamoto, the other wingman, and Jack said, "Yes, sir, no problem." And so, well, follow me. Down he went to about, well, I don't know how far you would guess that they are off the channel, but that's something like 50 feet, I think. Jack never did tell me, but he said it was quite amazing because he looked behind and he could see the vapor coming off the channel. It was a pretty rough day. He didn't want to go into the drink, but this is how Wing Commander Mullen, when he was a fighter pilot flying combat air patrol or Dieppe, this is how his flight would get home, so as not to attract any attention from the Luftwaffe, the F-80, F-190s, or the 109s, the few 109s that were over the beach. So he had this painting commissioned, and he uses it in his talks on Remembrance Day. And this is the plaque that goes along with it. I'm not going to spend any time on the plaque, but it's quite a moving, and he's quite proud of the QR code, which takes students to the story of the Dieppe landings. This is quite a memorable moment of his F-86 time, and you see again the painting is quite stunning. Moving now on to the 67, the year when the Red Knight was joined up with O.B. Phillips' family of performers, the Golden Centenaires, the Voodoo Starfighter Solos, and the two Avro 504K aircraft that you'll see arrayed in the background. You don't see a Red Knight because when this photo was taken, they were off doing a show. And the two teams were quite separate. They only crossed paths a few times for a few performances. You're going to hear about one or two of them, one in particular. You'll see Wing Commander Phipps is seated in the center. Don't worry, there's going to be a better shot of this, pointing him out. This is the humorous, altogether, the ensemble Canadair graphic that I'm going to dwell on this for a minute because you'll see some of the characters. You'll see Jack in the Red Knight with Rod Ellis, his alternate pilot, in the back seat, and you'll see Phipps on the ground, and also the chief of Canadair, who was supporting the team, on the ground, admiring these characters as they flew by. A particular note are the two Avro 504K, who had a 110 horsepower engine compared with the other aircraft. So it's quite an interesting case trying to do the choreography. This is the man himself, and I'm going to show you a little 3-minute clip about Jack's reverence, explaining Jack's reverence for the man as their leader. Wing Commander Phipps went on to become the base commander at, I forget the station, I think it was Portage, that gave birth to the snowbirds. But anyway, here we go. He was actually a World War II fighter pilot and a holder of the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Program, of course, wasn't singular. It was technically part of the Golden Centennials team and the two high performance of the Voodoo and the 104 and the Avro 504Ks. We see the two gentlemen bookended in World War I guard. And right in the center, dead center on the bottom row, is a gentleman that was critical to this esprit de corps, this ethos of fighter pilot, Wing Commander O.B. Phipps. And Jack.
And if I can just, yes, O.B. was a taskmaster and a choreography. He choreographed all of the Centenaire air display techniques, which are carried on into the snowbirds. I want to say, if you look at the slide on the right-hand side, beside the chap with the ground flying jacket on, that there in the room here, you have children of Red Knights. One of them is over here, and she is Corey Slaughter, and sitting on the right is her dad, Brigadier General, retired Bill Slaughter, who was also a Red Knight pilot and a Golden Centenaire pilot, and the Golden Centenaires became the Snowbirds.
So it wasn't all tense flying and really serious attitudes, because especially at Canadair, and you can see the caricatures. Bill Mountain got carried away with this image, and Jack, you film a little, show us a little on this one.
Well, it's just the best I could do there is just give you an idea of I want to mention the old Globes. They, of course, didn't fly with us because they just lacked the power, but they were a fantastic part of our team who was with us everywhere when we all got together, and they would do a mock air fight with the World War I biplane pilots. So, and the choreography for everything we done was done by Wing Commander O.B. Phil, a real taskmaster, and we were all scared of him, so we really worked hard.
The gentleman in that last clip pinning the commemorative medal on the Centennial Medal on Phillips was the commander of Training Command who gave his permission for the Red Knight, and he was actually the one behind the Red Knight and the Golden Centennials. I forget his name at the moment, but maybe you caught it. This was Jack's team, hardcore of the team. Jack, as a flight lieutenant, a captain, was in command of these 4 people, and this was the team. Sometimes they would cap on to 2 or 3 times they would tap into the Centennial support team, but they were sent across the country to over 100 locations, and the way it worked, the division of labor was the 2 technicians, as you'll hear in a minute, did all the servicing. And Rod Ellis on your on your left, the taller gentleman, was the junior alternative Red Knight when Jack, for whatever reason, couldn't take a flight. But he was tasked with doing all the front end work, the travel planning, the arrangements with the local community that had written in or requested an event or a performance. And Jack would oversee the entire thing, including he devised his program, which I'll get to in a minute. As part of this, moving around the country, there are many stories of how the crew chiefs kept the show on the road. This is one of the best ones. And let me just press on with this.
Magnificent team. Not talking about all of us. I'm talking about magnificent, our crew chiefs who are kneeling in front of us. We had 2 crew chiefs.
The bottom line with this clip is that they were stuck in Grand Prairie. They had done their show, and Jack's battery had dead. Jack's battery on the T-Bird. His alternatives battery was just fine, and they had to get home to Namao, which is about a 2-hour flight away. And it was closing in because they had another performance the next day, so what do? Jack was, this would have been an unnecessary overnight, and they would have had to fly in the technicians with a spare battery, etc., because maybe the battery was dead. The bottom line, though, was the technicians came up with a fix, and they said, well, boss, you know, if you can jump start a car, you can jump start a T-Bird. So they rummaged around in this very austere airport at the time, and they found a 40-foot, 28-volt cord, dilapidated cord, hadn't ever been used for much. They found it somewhere. They hooked it up. The 2 T-Birds were parked beside each other. They hooked them up, and his alternative, Rod Ellis, started up, and Jack got juiced, and the 2 of them handed back the 2 technicians handed back the cord and jumped in the aircraft, and away they went. No worries about the battery dying because it had been juiced up again. So this is the type of ingenuity that took place. I'm sorry that clip didn't work because I had some pretty nice photos of the inside of a T-Bird with a battery, but we'll press on. What was it like to do the routine? And I'll let Jack explain. This is a long clip, and we're getting near the end of the clips, but this is one worth knowing about.
Designing my show, I can explaining exactly what I did in a show because it was composed of maneuvers that I did in training, I did as a fighter pilot. And taking my airplane model here, when I did a show to really get audience enjoyment, which is what you want. You're doing a show for the people on the ground. You want to do an entry, catches their imagination, and basically it just means that flying not over them, but in front of them at quite a distance, because it's noisy and fairly low, kind of thrilling. You want to then, they see you going straight and level, and then they see you pull up and they wonder what you're doing if they're not used to air shows, and they're watching you go over the top. And a simple loop is a great starter. And then from then, you'll go into situations where you do turns. You come out of the loop, you're coming out of the loop here, you fly straight for a while, you pull up, and you want to turn, and you want to turn to come this way. So basically, you do a roll. That's kind of exciting. And when you come out of the roll, you're coming back the other way. It's just that simple. And then you fly straight along the ground at maybe 200 feet. Between 100 and 100 was our minimum, but 200 feet was kind of nice. And then for the next maneuver, you might do this again. You'd go like this and do what they call, you turn to the left and do a rhubarb roll and come around this way. And instead of flying straight and level, you fly inverted for the length of the runway. And then you pull up from that, you roll out, and you pull up and people say, well, you're going to do another loop. No, you don't. You come over the top of the loop, you just roll at the top and fly down 45 degrees and go down to about ground level of 100 feet above the ground and come up and do this, and that is what they call a Cuban 8. It was a figure 8, right? Max Immelmann was a famous German fighter pilot. So famous, the decoration that we get on the Order of Military Merit is a blue cross. It's called the Blauen Max in German, the Blue Max. I have the Order of Military Merit, and I'm kind of proud of that, having a Blue Max. But let's go on to say what the Immelmann is. The Immelmann is a maneuver that Max invented in 1915 as a fighter pilot. He said, there's got to be some way to do my job and stay safe myself. So if he's flying and you spy an enemy down here and you want to fire on him, because that's your job, basically what you do, he's flying along unbeknownst to you that you're there, and you don't want to be shot down yourself. You want to do something that confuses anybody that might be trying to shoot you down. So you just do you come in and turn and roll into a curve and roll out and come right in behind your target. And the point is, you're level with the target and you're going to be able to shoot at about 800 feet or so. And before that maneuver, you will have been turning all the time. So you're pretty unlikely to be a target yourself. That's an Immelmann. The important thing is, for the Red Knight program, that you have a fighter pilot background. That was an essential. You develop a sense of what you're doing as a fighter pilot because you've trained to a number of procedures, and so you're not going to do anything that's going to interfere with the safety of your program. The maximum G-force that you could exert on the airplane is 7.33 Gs. So that's 7 times your body weight, really. You would achieve that in something like my final maneuver, my final air show maneuver. I pulled 7.33 Gs. You had a G meter that showed it in the airplane, a little meter that's a 7.33. You don't want to go beyond that because you'll overstress the airplane. And what you do, what that looks like is this. Very quickly, you fly along straight and you go straight up. This was my final maneuver in my show. It was take me straight up, and my next routine was to roll as much as I could straight up until I ran out of speed. Then you're hit the other G force. You're weightless, truly weightless. It's like being in space, weightless. And so you could drift weightless, and basically what you're doing is what they call, it's a maneuver, and it's called a stall turn. That can turn into a tumble if you're not careful, because a tumble is total out of control. So you do have a minor bit of control as you come over the top, and you basically descend, and you don't need to put power on because you're going straight down. Gravity is giving you the energy, and you just come straight down, and at the bottom, pull out. And what the public is seeing looks pretty exciting, because they see you in a sort of a drifting mode, weightless, at maybe 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, and then they see you back level, flying in front of them, in front of the spectators. Then you're starting to think about the next interesting maneuver. I think that the most demanding aspect might encounter something that is unexpected. For instance, a flock of birds. You want to avoid a flock of birds. Those unexpected things happen. Traffic from other, maybe smaller airplanes coming into your area, because that will throw off your routine. And that's a danger, because the routines are built to flow into each other, and the thing you don't want to do is change your routine, because you may have an unexpected result from that.
I'm going to skip this next one and just move on to a couple of other things, and then we'll come to the climactic end. Jack mentioned that one of the challenges you face. Well, some of the other ones were things like having fog rolling in, as he did the show in Debert, which is only a short flying time, about 15 minutes from Shearwater, HMCS Shearwater, where he launched from. He was cognizant of the fact when he took off, he could see a bank of fog rolling in, famous Blue Nose, East Coast fog. Well, he did the show and got back just in the nick of time. He ran into a similar situation in Alberta one time, and flying out of Calgary. You'll know, if anyone's flown out of Calgary, there's high winds coming off the Rockies, so it's the same sort of a danger that a weather front could come moving in on you, so weather was always critical. This particular tale is a really great one, and this is an iconic photo that you've seen over the years, I'm sure. This is pasted into Jack's logbook. So I asked him, what's this all about? And he said, well, so there I was at 30,000 feet, when suddenly I realized that she wasn't quite as responsive, and oh my God, I left the luggage canister on. So what that is the luggage canister that they took their kit from place to place in. And this was a Canadair photo shoot. So it's for those of you who love trivia, this wasn't meant to be on there. It didn't present any danger, but it just did provide a bit of embarrassment because it was a PR photo shoot that Canadair had. Canadair guys loved it because it demonstrated the capability of the aircraft, but it wasn't supposed to happen. One of the big events was the opening at Expo. And I'm going to let Jack explain it because he tells it way better than I ever could. But you'll see what I mentioned earlier about one of his maneuvers. You'll find that this one crops up again. Here we go.
We opened up Expo 67, and this is where the call sign comes in.
Okay.
We opened up Expo 67 in Montreal over Ile Sainte-Hélène, which is center of Montreal,
right,
just in the river. And I think the Prime Minister at the time was Pearson. He was opening the Expo, and the opening time was 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 27th of April, 1967. That was our job to get there at that time.
Right, of course.
And we did. We went into a holding pattern over Est-Montréal, Verdun area. And then when the time was appropriate, we flew in, the whole bunch, the 8 Tudors, gold Tudors, level, about 300 feet above the ground, and the 2 supersonic, the fighters, the Voodoo and the 101 beside, and I was just behind because I had a job to do. Our boss choreographed it. He was the head of the Centenaires, the whole team, which was really the first snowboard team.
Right.
Which became the snowboard
Evolved
team later.
into it.
Yeah. The choreography direction was to the leader of the Golds and to each of the supersonic aircraft and to me. The Golds would say, the Gold leader would say, climbing now. And that was my clue to say, burners now. They fired up their burners and went straight up to 20,000 feet.
Oh, shoot.
Then my job was to do something interesting, and I did a very gentle, graceful, I think, barrel roll.
Okay.
And we were all smoking. They were smoking. They had smoke, and I was smoking. The big ones didn't smoke. They had fire come out of the.
Okay, right. They had other.
Yeah, they had other stuff. The interesting part about it was, and this is the part that is an add-on that I didn't plan on. I came out of the roll, and God, this is a beautiful day, and I was over the St. Lawrence, and I'll do another roll, and so good, and oh, why not another? And you're losing energy at the time. By the time I finished the last roll, I saw more of downtown Longueuil on the South Shore. You've been to Longueuil on the South Shore than you ever want to see.
Right.
So
that's too funny.
I was on the rooftops.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just a quick note about this particular famous painting. It was about an incident where the snowbirds and the Centenaires and the Red Knight had its biggest ever audience, 700 million on worldwide live television and 300,000 plus on the ground. So this was quite the biggest event. And Montreal at the time, of course, was the biggest city. The country was only 20 million. And it was the second only time that the team performed together, the other one being at the CNE. So they did quite an interesting job. This is the view, not quite 200 feet as Jack was, but this is about 500 AGL above downtown Longueuil. So Jack would have seen something like this, but a lot closer. Just a couple of other tales that I'll just quickly go through. The only thing that actually threatened the entire Red Knight team was a stress fracture in the elevator panel that the technicians detected between shows. I think it was out west, and they were in a remote location, so their fix was to do a quick end drilling. And if any of you know about this, this is where you see the crack in the metal. You end drill just before it is able to progress, and it won't be able to go past that hole. So that was the quick fix. Another quite interesting story was, and I'll be very quick about this one, they're in the central part of Newfoundland, Newfoundland having only been a province for a while, and they were on their own, and they had been, Jack had gotten into the habit of doing pretty fast landings, and Bob Hawes, his crew chief, came up to us and said, "Hey boss, take it easy on the landings. We're a long way from home. We don't want to have a tire blown out." So from then on, that was the lower ranks talking convincingly to the upper ranks. So from then on, Jack said, "Oh, I'll take it easy on the landings." And it was a story he never told O.B. Phillips about how his techs again saved the show. That was quite a sheepish moment for Jack, because he really loved those landings, but his tires were wearing out. Just summing up the Red Knight experience, Jack figures the total audience was just over 1 million, so about 1/10 of the country saw him. Performance flown 101, of which he did 94. And the practice sessions actually were a lot more hours, 95 plus 185 in terms of practice sessions. And days on the road, this is particularly interesting because it was about 109. So that's a lot of time away from hearth and home for this small crew. Days at home, including the workups, were only 36. So the wives and the families didn't see much of their dads. And the total Red Knight T33 time was 600 and plus hours, 668, of which 507 were logged in transit, so a lot of transit time. Near the end of the event, Jack said, near the end of the season, a couple of days just before the end of the season, Jack said, "Yes, our most fearsome enemy threatened us, and that was Snoopy on the back of his doghouse." You remember Charles M. Schultz had quite this little long-running skit with his Peanuts, and some local reporter dug this out not far from where I grew up in Durham County, dug this out and published it on October 20th, 67, and the team they wished this had come up earlier because it was great comic relief with the community newspapers and with the children in particular. So I've given you a blow-up of an alleged conversation Jack had with his controller about, "You're never going to believe this," and it was kind of a little bit of a humor on the road. And after that long on the road, of course, something like this is a real morale boost when you're getting long and tired, and the events are piling up on you in the hours away, etc. One other thing that did happen, technically at the end of the show, after the expo opening, was the Thunderbirds had a crash, and it had to be investigated. And there was a show in Schenectady, New York. I don't know, some of you may have been there, and it was a long-running show, and the commander of the Thunderbirds phoned up O.B. Phillips saying, "Listen, can you help us out? We're hurting. We can't make the show. Do you have anyone that could do this for us?" And Phillips volunteered Jack. So sure enough, off they went. They got a nice letter they did the show, 28,000 or so, 20,000 spectators, big press exposure, and a very nice letter of commendation from the head of the USAF in charge of these exhibits, the training command, and much appreciation. So real comradeship. To this day, it extends, because when Jack was at the air show in 2024 in Gatineau, Quebec, the commander of the Thunderbirds who were performing there on one of the social evenings mentioned this to Jack. Now, he probably wasn't even born at the time, but this is the legacy and the camaraderie between the various exhibit teams. This is one of Jack's most stunning photos. It's something that he creates, and you'll see it on this brochure. But it's one of his favorite photos of him landing his T-bird and another T-bird breaking off. Now, there's actually a composite photo of the two aircraft. They never did this. It was just made up in the edit suite, so to speak. But it's quite a picturesque beauty. You're going to see one other beauty for those of you who are photo enthusiasts. And one little side note about the impact on Canada across the nation. To this day, there are some 40 plus alleged T-birds in parks, community centers, in aviation museums, etc. across the country, only 2 of which are the actual original, were actually the original Red Knight. The one at CAHS that you saw Jack being filmed in front of, and the one at Saskatoon, which is actually Jack's favorite mount. This is tail number 21630. And so just, again, a little trivia. I'm going to give the last word to Jack, and there'll be a closing here that's quite impressive. So I just want to, I can't do much about the audio, so I just wanted to let you know. So stand by, and here we go.
As for flying 94 of 101 Red Knight performances?
The joy of flying the performance, and I often thought of this, even before I ever read High Flight by John McGee, who was a RCAF pilot in the Second World War, who wrote the poem High Flight. And it starts with, I have slipped the silly bounds of earth and danced with laughter-filled wings among the clouds. It ends with, and reached out and touched the face of God. And when you're doing an air show, you get that emotion, and it's almost a musical, because you can do an air show to music. In fact, many, many years later, I watched the Italian Air Force aerobatic team do an air show to the music of one of Verdi's operas. It was fantastic. And they basically were keeping their maneuvers in time with the music. So when the music was soaring, they were soaring. And descending, they were descending. It was just fantastic. So that's my best feeling about doing an air show.
For the Red Knights' contributions to Canadian military aviation, the solo aerobatic display team was presented with the Belt of Orion Award for Excellence by Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in 2022.
So, thank you very much. Any questions?
In 1967, how many aircraft did they have? Did they have one backup or two backup to fly in the red colors?
They just had two. Jack's principal mount, and then the alternative, which was Rod Ellis's aircraft. So just two, and it was just that small team of personnel, four.
Yeah. And here's another, there was a model of the Red Knight, a very rare model. It was made in 2009-11, and Falcon Models, I was speaking to Aviation World, it runs, if you see it on eBay, about $170 for the only die-cast quality Red Knight aircraft made in die-cast.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Now, Jack would dispute that, because you know that model that he was using as the old flight instructor in him? That's also a die-cast, and I think there was a special edition that he managed to tap into through his ex-Air Force network. But that's good to know.
Maybe that's the same one. I just spoke to Aviation World, and they said it's been gone for quite some time, and it's a very rare one to come across. Thank you.
John?
Here. I'm curious, since the Red Knight was a solo aerobatic demonstration, how much creative freedom did the different Red Knights have to create their own unique routine versus was there kind of a set default routine that they pretty much followed, maybe put some individual twists of their own that had been, you know, kind of ready to go, or was it complete freedom, do what you want?
So far as I'm aware, and I asked Jack this very question about his performance, it was complete carte blanche. They were all very experienced fighter pilots, all fairly senior. The working rank was flight lieutenant. And they were all exceptional talents, like Jack, mostly. And they devised their own techniques. Sometimes they overlapped, and sometimes they would all want to know what each preceding Red Knight had done. And they sometimes even got together to they happened to be at the same station, so they would, or one chap would be passing through, and they would get to know, go have a drink or whatever. But there was a lot of separate. If you look at the different performances, the routines that when I did some of the research for this, the routine in '63 over the CNE wasn't as long as some of the older ones, later ones, and some of the routines were. I mean, the very first year, '58, there were only about 3 or 4 performances, and they were pretty rudimentary by comparison. But the short answer is carte blanche, and it wasn't as if O.B. Phillips in '67 had a strong hand in this. He was far too busy orchestrating the Centenaires and the other elements of the display team. He and the Centenaire leader. It's an interesting story, and I should tell you, how did Jack get recruited to do this in '67? Because it wasn't originally thought that the Red Knight would team up as part of Phillips' command. In fact, there wasn't even a sure decision that the Red Knight would actually go on while the Centenaires were in existence. And the reason for that was probably budgetary considerations, because soon after there were always pressure in the press about, I remember even as a 14 or 15-year-old hearing, we're not sure we can do much like today, we're not sure we can do certain things because of financial constraints. Anyway, back to Jack. He had just taken a desk job in Waterloo. The Canadian Forces was merging, and he had just taken a desk job at Waterloo as a recruiting officer, a local recruiting officer. He had a Navy guy with him, he had a couple of Army guys, and he saw that through his network that Phillips had been given this remit to go create a team. So he wrote him a letter saying, Dear Wing Commander, congratulations. Looking forward to hearing of the success. 3 or 4 days later, you got a phone call, and Phillips said, he's a very straightforward guy, he said, "You're our new Red Knight." That's it, end of story. Now, Phillips knew him because they had flown at the same station, Gross-Tekin, when they were fighter pilots there. So, and Jack knew him through some sort of mess function. He was secretary of the mess at the time, and Phillips was the wing commander. So they knew each other, and they had flown together, etc. But they're not 2 other squadrons. It's not like they were bosom buddies or anything. Anyway, so Jack said, "Okay," put the phone down, went home, and talked over with his wife. His wife said, "Gee, we just bought a house," and she could see he really wanted to do this. And he said, "Yeah." Next couple of days, he thought about it and phoned back to Phillips and said, "Yes, I'm your man." And Phillips never never gave him much more instructions. And one particular occasion, on one of their first meetings, he said, "So, you know what you have to do." And away he went and did it. So that was the extent of the construction. Pretty incredible. No administrative bureaucracy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a great supplement to what you did in Ottawa a few months ago with Jack. Just, getting into the weeds with how he did some of those routines. So that was fun to see.
Well, one of the great pleasures in working with him for as long as I have, researching this, and he's such a live wire, and you could see it in the video, and he's just like that today. If I were to call him up, and I did a couple of days ago, just to nail down, you want to be careful with the reputation and the history, and you want to get it right. And he was just very forthcoming, very effusive with his knowledge, and it's as if he was just gotten out of the cockpit. It's just his memory is so crystal clear, and he goes to his logbook to refresh it, etc. But he's quite the character. Any other questions? Yes, at the top, very top there. Ted. I should mention that I'm a bit hearing challenged.
Thanks, Eric. Okay. Brian, that was wonderful. Just given that the Red Knights did perform with the Golden Centenaires, the Tudors, did any of the Red Knights ever perform prior to that with the Golden Hawks, with the F-86 Sabres?
Sorry, did any of the Red Knights ever perform?
With the Golden Hawks.
Oh. Yes, several of them did. I should remember their names. There was a lot of cross-fertilization with the Golden Hawks. Now, the Golden Hawks, as you know, as some of you may know, was Canada's F-86 demonstration team for, I think it was 5 years, and they went away due to budget cuts in, I think it was 64. And several of those members went on to other roles. Some of them went to strike aircraft, the 104s, flying the 104s, some to fly desks, some went off to fly airlines with the airlines because their term had ended. And this was the era of the great pilot purge. I think it was 63 when the RCAF let 500 pilots go. They weren't all fighter pilots, of course, but they let 500 pilots go, and there was subsequent right-sizing actually there. But there was a cadre of pilots that flew. Rod Ellis was a Golden Hawk, and he was a Centenaire, and he was also had been a Red Knight. He was not a Golden Hawk. There was there were other cross-fertilization. Anything else?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
The actual, the actual.
Wait for the mic, Brian.
The actual T-33 from 1967, is that preserved anywhere? The actual aircraft that he flew in '67.
Yes, on the. It is indeed on the RCAF Association. I forget the number in Saskatoon. It's the aircraft that's on that outside of that building. That's Jack's favorite mount. And he said it was a beautiful aircraft to fly. He said many of them had their quirks. This one had no vices, no quirks. That one is preserved. And the only other aircraft that is preserved that was actually an RCF Red Knight is in the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum. I'll find you the slide here. There it is. These two. So the one on the right is the one at 602 wing RCAF. And that's my friend Terry Holland, who wished he could have been here today. And he's with the Calgary chapter. So when we were out for the convention at Saskatoon, we ducked in and I got these shots. And this is the shot from John Corrigan of the only other Red Knight. This was Rod Ellis's mount in, I think it was Rod Ellis's mount in 67. So there you go. All other aircraft, all of the Red Knight aircraft are, as Donald Trump would say, fake news, but good for them. Just get this advertisement up here. There we are. This is John Corrigan's collection of books. I'll just leave that one up there.
Okay.
I'll leave this one too.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. On behalf of the chapter, it's just a superlative presentation. I was at the convention in Ottawa, and everyone enjoyed your talk there, but to see this embellished presentation today with so much more information and so many informative clips on a remarkable story of Jack Waters and the Red Knight, well, it's just exceptional. And on behalf of the chapter, I'd like to present you with this.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you all for your
You're most
patience.
welcome.
And I'm sorry about the little clip there, and there was one little repeat, which I'll expunge. Sorry, but thank you.
You're very welcome.
And one more thing, we have one more task for you to do, Brian,
Yes.
for this Billy Bishop book.
Okay, so I've actually bought my wife and I a ticket, so I hope we win. I just declare this right now. Okay, here we go. Okay, so 518818. Do we have a lucky winner? Roger.
Roger.
The fix is in.
He's saying do another one. You sure, Roger? Okay, we're going to re-dip.
This will strain my my talents here. Here we go. Okay, stand by. Here we are. 518815. That's just, oh my goodness.
Nobody?
That's me. The only time it ever happens, and I already own the book, so we'll do one more draw. Okay, here we go. All right, 518827.
Okay, Suzanne. All right. We are running a little late, but the message is expecting us. But John, I think you have a few words. If you can keep it brief. And then, just a minute, please join us at the mess afterwards for refreshments. And behind the podium, please. And I'll hand it over to John for a brief comments.
So this mic? Just Brian gets an extra present, just a little personal souvenir of some pictures collected in 2025. 3 sections all to do with Red Knight, and a lot of them from the Ottawa convention in June, which and a couple of people here were fortunate to see. So have a look at it during the reception. There's just some fun. It's a souvenir. It's a little scrapbook. So
thank you so much. All right.